Basically, they have a lot going on and you have to compact everything into one book, and that's really hard. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we're going to be doing episode 2 of my Star Wars canon project. Alright, before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, have you read any Star Wars books? Are you wanting to read some Star Wars books now, or am I forcing Star Wars on you? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. As I mentioned, this is episode 2 of my Star Wars canon project, and I'll put a link to the previous one in the cards up above where I sort of introduced it, but long story short, basically I am reading through all of the canon Star Wars books this year, which is a very long project. Once again, I'm going to be reviewing 4 of the Star Wars books that I read, and the first up is actually a continuation from a book in the prior video, Path of Vengeance by Cavan Scott. This one is the most direct sequel to Path of Deceit. In these, we are following members of the Path of the Open Hand, this cult that believes the Jedi are abusing the Force by using it in the way they do. Rather, they think of the Force as its own being that has its own agenda and its own thoughts and wishes. So when Jedi bend it to their own will, they're taking the Force away from what it thinks is best. This book returns to the 2 cousin characters that are a member of the Path, Marta and Yana, though they have both started to have differing opinions on what the Path actually means and what their plans are actually going to be. Specifically though, Marta ends up volunteering herself to travel to this magical planet in order to get some sort of a artifact for the mother, the leader of the cult, to prove herself to the mother. While at the same time, Yana is determined to showcase to her cousin what the mother truly is, and that the Path is not as great as she seems to think it is. I'm fairly certain this is the ending of phase 1, and we're gonna officially find out the end of the whole plot around the Path of the Open Hand, and I'm so excited. So then the next one, starting into phase 2, is about 100 years in the future, and that first one is Light of the Jedi. At this point in time, the Republic is truly thriving, and they are trying to grow, particularly through setting up new hyperspace lanes around the Outer Rim. Unfortunately though, a disaster happens in one of these hyperspace lanes, and it causes such a wide variety of catastrophes across many different parts of the galaxy, and the Jedi are sort of stuck in the middle of this, trying to save people, trying to solve this issue, but at the same time still trying to showcase to these planets that what the Republic is trying to do is for the betterment of everyone. Obviously, with a lot of disasters going on, not everybody is in agreement on that. I'm a little nervous for this one just because it's going to be a whole new cast of characters, meaning we're gonna get introduced to a whole lot of characters. These are space operas. There's always a very large cast, and I'm gonna have to find a new favorite. Next up, we have Into the Dark, which is the first young adult novel in this phase, and we're going to be following 𝗖cie, who is a Padawan. However, he doesn't really want adventure. He doesn't want glory or to be a Jedi Knight. He'd rather be an archivist, and that's kind of what he's been doing on Coruscant. However, his master is not going to let him be that unbalanced and sort of forces him to join her in the Outer Rim. I'm gonna assume working to help people from those emergencies in the prior book. But along the way, 𝗖cie, as well as the other people he's traveling with, kind of get stranded in space. They end up staying on this abandoned space station, and weird stuff starts to happen. I'm really excited for this one because this setup kind of seems sort of similar to that sci-fi horror book, what's it called? Dead Silence. And I think the idea of that, like a sci-fi horror but in the Star Wars world, sounds so much fun. Plus it'll kind of help this one to stand out a little bit more. This will also be my first of Claudia Gray's work, and she's a name that is pretty prevalent in the Star Wars canon books I've seen. Very hopeful I will enjoy her writing style. Finally is The Rising Storm, which is probably the most direct sequel to Light of the Jedi by Cavan Scott. So this one is obviously going to be kind of going off the events of Light of the Jedi, meaning I don't want to read too much about what's going on here, but it seems as though they are putting on this Republic fair in the Outer Banks. However, things don't go as smoothly as expected when villain characters decide to make an appearance. And that's all I want to know. I'm so excited for this next section. I'm really hopeful I will love some of these and hopefully find some new favorite characters, because this section of the High Republic is a little bit longer, so meaning I might get to stay with these characters a little bit more. But that is it for now, y'all. I will talk to you again when I have started into Path of Vengeance. Hey y'all, so I have hit the halfway point into Path of Vengeance, and I figured out pretty early on that it actually seems the events in this book take place starting at the end of the Battle of Jedha, and then it looks like we're actually watching the lead up to the climax in Cataclysm, but through the eyes of Marta and Yana, who were members of the Path of the Open Hand. And with these two cousins, I love seeing the juxtaposition of their reactions to the events they're watching unfold. Here, it's so interesting to see how they're developing and changing with these characters. It's just amping up so much more, and it's actually also shifting in ways that I wasn't really expecting. Marta believes so deeply in the Path's ideology. She does not think they can do anything wrong. And even though there are so many red flags to the events she has been privy to, she just can't view them as an issue. That is what the Force wills, that is what the mother who is the leader of this cult believes, so she has to believe it too. And that does make her chapters a little bit frustrating to read, but I also do think the writing in them is just so well done because of that and the fact that I am frustrated in reading her perspective. Yana, on the opposite side, is just so bitter and has become very jaded to the Path, but she's also so wrapped up in it. She has too many connections to make a clean break. It is kind of interesting that my preference for the cousins' perspectives have shifted. I definitely preferred Marta's more in the prior book, but in this one, Yana's is far more interesting to me. Like seeing her as a character a bit more, maybe because of that anger she has towards the cult, even though Marta's perspective is very well written. But at the same time, Marta's chapters definitely are progressing the plot a lot more. There's also this romance that's developing between her and another Path member that has recently been elevated to roughly the same status she has, and I just think it's so unnecessary. Particularly in those moments, it really is glaringly obvious to me that Cavan Scott is writing Marta a little bit more immature than I felt like she came across in Path of Deceit. But it also has been like a month between these two books, so I guess like take that critique with a grain of salt. We have actually seen a few chapters through a Padawan's eyes. Her name is Maddie, and she's very adorable. I love her already. She's a little chatterbox, has spent most of her time as a Padawan on Jedha, so she's actually pretty sheltered as far as Padawan go. And this is one of her first big off-world missions. She also is going along with Master Olivia. I really like Olivia because when you first meet her, she seems kind of like a drill sergeant and is just like really rough and almost cold. But once it's just Maddie and Olivia interacting, she is so much fun. She just is trying to make this experience one that is very educational, but also really entertaining for Maddie. So she finds joy in her identity as a Jedi. Just shortly before the halfway point, those two have officially arrived on Dalna to try and investigate into the Path. It makes the stakes a lot higher in their perspective because obviously I already know the events that this book is leading up to, seeing as how I read Cataclysm. Also because of the ending events in Path of Deceit, I know to be concerned about how the Path responds to Jedi infiltrating their ranks. Oh, I am nervous for that, seeing as how I like our Padawan and Master so much. I am really liking this so far. Hey y'all, so I have finished out Path of Vengeance and I really liked this. Definitely a satisfying ending to the Path of the Open Hand and just like that group as a whole. Really liked what happened here. There are events that take place right at the end that make me wonder whether this is going to be the last of this group that we've seen. Even though the next book's like 100 years in the future, I still just feel like something's gonna recur here. I just know it. As I mentioned in my previous update, Marta's perspective got really frustrating because she believes so deeply in what the Path stands for. She is such an extreme religious zealot that she just constantly is disregarding all of these giant red flags flying in her face. But I have to admire Scott's writing of her. She's completely convincing. I totally understand why she is acting this way. It makes perfect sense for the character that's been developed. Doesn't mean it's enjoyable to read. It's very frustrating if anything, but I applaud Scott's writing for it. The romance element that I complained about previously also just continued to be unnecessary in my opinion. I think we could have gotten the exact same results if it had just been like a new friend that Marta bonded with and then this was revealed. I don't think the romance part was really needed, especially after already having a small romance in the previous book. I had equally frustrating moments with Yana, but for very different reasons. Because of her devotion to her girlfriend Core, she makes a few decisions that I just, oh my god, had me shaking my head and wanting to scream at her and showcase like why that was dumb. But again, even though I didn't like it, I can acknowledge the fact that that does showcase how well written she was, because I totally got everything she did. I totally followed her motivation in every situation, but I didn't like it. Very interesting read in regard to those two characters. I loved Maddie the more we saw of her, the Padawan. I actually wanted so much more from her. She's a little chatterbox who is so determined to showcase she is going to be a fantastic Jedi that she will not allow any other Jedi to stand in her way. There's this moment where she and the master she's traveling with, Olivia, are on the cusp of figuring something out by interviewing people within the hand, but their credibility is shot because a bunch of Jedi counselors and masters arrive from Coruscant in the middle of this situation, and she goes off on them for it. It was so funny. She and Olivia do become a lot more prevalent in the latter half of the story. Olivia is really interesting because she puts on this like feeling of being super aloof and too cool for school, but like once we get to really see more of her, she's kind of a giant nerd, putting on an act, trying to showcase to everybody that she's fine, she's totally fine. But the events off of the Battle of Jeddah have definitely impacted her a lot more than she has let on. Like I said, I really wanted to see more of those two in particular, and I was glad they did become more prevalent as the story progressed. I would love to just have another book with Maddie as a character. Since I did know what was going to take place in regard to the climax thanks to the ending of Cataclysm, I was a little concerned that suspense wouldn't be really built up very well and nothing would be super shocking. Not true. Not true at all. Once I hit the climax, I could not put this book down. It was so good. Everyone is in danger, and there's actually this transition from the path of the open hand to the path of the closed fist, which was mentioned in Cataclysm, but we didn't actually see that taking place. So it was explained here, and I was very glad for it. The twists, though, that take place at the end of this were wild. I was actually listening to this while I worked out in between push-ups and just paused to scream what, because it was so unexpected. Now, I liked the end of this book. I did. But I'm a little surprised it didn't end on a darker note in comparison to how Path of Deceit did. Also, seeing as how this does tie in with Cataclysm, and there were some really serious elements in the battle there, I was a little surprised we didn't see more of those here, but I guess this is a YA book, and I was complaining that that book didn't quite have the severity I was expecting. Why would this one? So yeah, I really liked this. It came down to 4.5 stars again. I still had a few complaints, but really enjoyed this. So good. Wow. Still flabbergasted at how good the YA books in this little section have been. Hey guys, so first off, I'm like super on theme. So I got my Hera lo-fi playing in the background. I'm wearing a Darth Vader t-shirt. And then obviously we're here to talk about Star Wars. So I've hit the halfway point into The Light of the Jedi, which is the first book and next phase. So I think I figured out that the High Republic itself works as a series, but also within that series, there are phases based on the time period and an ongoing plot. I finished up phase 1 with Path of Vengeance, meaning now I'm on to phase 2. I just keep talking like I know what I'm saying, but no, not really. Anyway, I have hit the halfway point into this, and I gotta admit, wow, Soule really just throws you into the action. He just throws you into the thick of it and is like, you'll figure it out. Have fun. You alternate between many different perspectives of all these different characters who are either experiencing or working to try and find a solution for this disaster that's taking place after there's a ship that is destroyed in hyperspace. So then when it emerges out of hyperspace, all this debris is just going flying. And it's not only endangering a single planet, it's literally endangering an entire system. So obviously, really big deal here. Stakes are really high, and at the beginning, things are actually moving really quickly. I was pulled to the edge of my seat almost instantly because of both those things. All of that excitement lasts probably the first 30% of the book, I would say. But after that, then questions start coming up, how did this happen? Why did this happen? What started this? And that definitely kicked up my intrigue even more because, a sci-fi mystery element. I want to know what's going on. Now that things have started to calm down in the last 20-ish% I've read, we're starting to actually get a more clear understanding of what our cast is, our recurring characters we're going to be seeing. And even then, there's still a large number of them, both Jedi and not. The one I will say I'm most interested in is this group called the Nihil, which kind of seem like space pirates. However, the tie-in, I think, between this one and phase 1 is that the leader of this group is Marshonian Ro, who I believe is supposed to be a descendant of Marda Ro. Oh, I am so intrigued to see like what more about his background and like what became of Marda's beliefs and the influence they've had on the people throughout her life. Oh, I'm really interested in that. On the opposite side though, unfortunately, we follow a few different groups of Jedi, and for right now, just nobody's really standing out to me. I don't feel super strongly about anyone in particular. We have Avar, and then we also have a Padawan, that's right, Bell. Again, like, I don't feel like we've seen enough of their personalities or the dynamics they have with the other people in their group to really get a solid hold on their character and endear me to them, make me excited to continue following them because of who they are as a character. We also get occasional perspectives of outside people, like people who were impacted by this disaster or politicians that are trying to investigate this disaster. You know, that doesn't really help when you have those random people sliding in. I would rather have that time dedicated to recurring characters we're going to be seeing from. I just feel like the inclusion of them kind of makes the story feel more fragmented, which is definitely my biggest complaint thus far, is after we surpass that destruction at the beginning, the storylines throughout this feel really fragmented. I get how it works together, but for how the writing is going right now, it all feels so fragmented, and I just don't really know how it's going to be satisfying to see it all come together in the latter half of the plot. But I don't know. This is my first of Soule's work. We'll see if he manages to do it. One way or another, though, I am excited to continue reading. Hey guys, I have a little buddy. I finished out Light of the Jedi. I am so bummed that I did not like this more. This very much feels like the start of a series. It is so obvious that this is just the introduction of the story, because where things end here, you don't really get many answers. There's not really a satisfying conclusion. The book ends on such a cliffhanger, but like in the most unsatisfying way possible. Obviously, in this case, I'm going to continue reading the series because it's the Star Wars universe. Like, that was the whole idea of starting into these. But if it wasn't, if this was just like the first book in another series that I was picking up, I wouldn't continue the series because I want to, because I'm liking it. I would continue the series because I want to get answers. And I don't like that. It sort of feels like you're like tricking me into buying the next book. I also never felt like I was really connected to any of the characters we're introduced to. We alternate between so many perspectives. Way too many, in my opinion. With these two groups of Jedi we follow, you spend a little bit of time with every single one of their perspectives, and I just don't think that was really needed. Doing that made it so that I could not get connected to anybody. Probably the people we saw from the most are Avar Kriss, who I believe is a knight, and then Bell, who is a Padawan. I mean, with Bell's group, we literally spent more time alternating between all of the different characters in his little group rather than just like focusing on him, which I think really would have been much more beneficial. Or like with Avar, we see through her eyes, but we also see through people she's like interviewing or talking with, as well as her partner Elvar. Again, like, just should have just dedicated that time to her alone, and I would have grown to care about her as a character and then been more invested in the dynamic she has with these other characters rather than alternating between all of them, because now I have like no solid feeling of anybody's personality except for Marshonian Ro, who is like going to be a villain character. I will say I actually really am intrigued by him. We do get a few answers in regard to like his identity and what's driving him through the story, but I'm still so thirsty for more, especially knowing the background of like where his family comes from and his family's beliefs. He's probably the one other character that I think we see from the most, and that's why I actually feel strongest about him, the villain character of the story. The plot is definitely like the biggest thing in this one. It's not a bad thing at all. It's just that I'm not really a plot alone driven reader. I want characters. I am really intrigued to see how the story is going to continue from like the few answers we do get here, but I am let down by this one. So my rating for this came out to like 3.5 stars. Again, obviously I'm going to continue reading, but annoyed that I did not love this more, unfortunately. Hey guys, so I put the halfway point into the Dark, and unfortunately for me, this is not the sci-fi horror I went in hoping for, but I am still liking it, at least in regard to the cast. The plot I do have a few qualms with, but Let's start positive first. I actually really like that the main Padawan we're following, 𝗖ście, has no interest in being a daring adventurer. Rather, he wants to be an archivist, but his master won't let him be that unbalanced. He needs to be a bit more well-rounded in her opinion. And because of that, she asks for him to join her in the Outer Rim. However, she goes ahead of time. He ends up taking a ship ride with some other Jedi to the Outer Rim. And along the way so far, it's been really fun seeing him getting outside of his usual comfort zone and watching as this giant nerd actually has to save people's lives, get in fights. One of the Jedi he is traveling with is also a fellow archivist who has really specialized in, again, studying different artifacts and learning about the history of this universe, which is something I'm really enjoying with these two characters because we are getting to see more of the universe, little bits about like the different population and planets in the area they're in, but at the same time also getting to see some of those elements in regard to the Jedi. For example, one I thought was super cool was the Kyber Arch. This arch with all of the Kyber crystals from lightsabers of fallen Jedi in order to honor them. That's super awesome. These Jedi live a life that is very based in doctrine, but they are still humans. Well, okay, they're still sentient beings. They're not perfect and they still struggle. So I really like getting to see the more humanizing side of these characters when they are having a hard time sticking true to what they've been told their whole life. I just find it very interesting seeing more about the Jedi philosophies and also how they struggle with this and how they can still manage to twist it a little bit to fit more with their own beliefs. That's the positives, but with talking about characters, I do think this one is falling into the issue of having too many perspectives. We have one Padawan, two Jedi Knights, one Jedi Master, two pilots, and I think there might have been like a one or two random one, on top of there being flashbacks to events that took place 25 years in the past between two of the Jedi. So it's a lot going on. The plot itself takes place around the same time as the hyperspace disaster in The Light of the Jedi. Just around the halfway point, we kind of surpass that accident. But unfortunately, by the point I'm at, it feels like really very little has happened in the plot. I think the author definitely could have played up some of the more unsettling aspects, particularly because the Jedi feel the dark side is present there. It just wasn't really utilized to the full extent, in my opinion. That's about it. In the past timeline, we know that something terrible is going to happen, but we don't really know what it is. We're just kind of watching these characters react to the kidnapping. I need something more. I want more action here. Probably not a favorite, even though I do really like 𝗖ście as a character. I really am hopeful we do see more of him. There's been a small mention of the Nihil. We'll see how the rest of this goes. Hey guys, so I officially have finished Out Into the Dark. And I did like this book. I definitely think I might have found a new favorite Jedi character to follow in this phase of the High Republic. I really liked 𝗖ście, and I'm also really interested in 𝗖lla because of the ability she poses to question the council and seeing the descent of a Jedi and sort of like how they maybe start to lose faith in what the council is telling them. I think that is super interesting and I would love to see some expanded upon it. While I do understand how the events between these two timelines connected, I don't think it played a big enough role in the story so far to really warrant that much page time. It could have been done so much faster, gotten the point across so much easier, and then if we had done that, those extra pages could have been dedicated more to the current timeline plot with the mysterious space station and the dark forces that were found there, expand upon the historical elements that were being discussed, as well as the emotional struggles we were seeing, especially in the latter half of this book. I definitely think there's going to be a little bit of 𝗖ście sort of struggling with his identity as a Jedi even more, but also in trying to control the negative emotions that are more often tied to dark forces. And I also think that would perfectly parallel with Bell in Light of the Jedi and what we're going to be seeing from him. I think, I'm not 100% sure there, but like I could see both of these characters bonding over that. And I did like this one. It just didn't really live up to what I went in expecting, and it wasn't nearly as enthralling as I was hoping for. But again, I actually liked the characters here, which is something a little bit more than what I was feeling in Light of the Jedi. I had more attachment towards 𝗖ście, towards 𝗖lla, towards Cohmac.
I'm 100% certain that we do see more from Wreath and Comac. I'm not sure on Orla though, but I would love for more of her. So in the end, this one came out to about 3.5 stars. Not bad, but again, not a new favorite. And I don't know if it's necessarily one I'll be thinking back on super often, unfortunately.
Hey guys, so I hit the halfway point in The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. Thankfully, this is finally starting to pick up because unfortunately, I think my biggest issue I've been having so far is the fact that there were so many characters again, and also the pacing. The pacing in this one has been quite jumpy. It is either go, 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 full of action, or it is slowing down. We are purely focusing on this fair that is taking place in the Outer Rim, which our Chancellor, Lena So, is using to try and connect everybody and convince them that, you know, the Republic can actually do positive things, which is really cool, and I agree with what she's trying to do there, but it's not really entertaining to watch. And shockingly, I don't think we've actually seen from Marchion Ro again, which I'm a little bummed about. But we are starting to see that the Nihil are getting involved in some of the things that were presented in the prior phase. But also we have once again seen the leveler monster that has some sort of a negative effect on people connected to the Force. And I do actually like how Scott used that. It was pretty clever, but because I had that prior knowledge, I also expected what was going to happen there. Our man is a Jedi we're seeing through a second time. He was also involved in Light of the Jedi, and he struggles with cutting off attachments, which I like seeing that, except I don't feel convinced by it. I don't feel convinced that he is having a hard time separating himself from the people around him. It more seems like he's just thinking with the wrong head. It's also been really interesting to see through the eyes of Stellan, who is a different Jedi Master that we've met here. He is friends with Elzar as well as Avar. On one hand, he very much feels like a politician, but on the other hand, like, he does not want that role. He just wants to be a Jedi Master and do what is necessary in order to protect people. I do really like him for that. Then we have our Padawan Bell, who is still sort of suffering off of the events from Light of the Jedi. In his chapters particular, I feel like there's been a lot of action, which I've really enjoyed seeing, because again, it helps the pacing pump back up. I want more time with him to really experience that and see how he is working through it. I just don't feel that the author is really expanding upon it in a satisfying way, unfortunately. We also have this one character who is sensitive to the Force, uses a lightsaber, but seems more to be like a hired gun or a mercenary. And I'm fascinated by her. I also really want more from her because she's so interesting. There's been a lot going on in the plot, but at the same time, because we constantly keep going back to this fair, it feels like not nearly enough is really happening for the breadth of the plot. That being said though, like I mentioned, right at the point I stopped, action is going to be going on. The Nihil are not pleased that they were not invited to this fair, and they're about to make it everybody's problem. One way or another, like, this is going fairly well. It's just not quite living up to my love of Cavan Scott's prior book that I read. Path of Vengeance was just so well done. Many of the issues I'm having just come down to the fact that, like, it's a space opera. Basically, they have a lot going on and you have to compact everything into one book, and that's really hard. Hey guys, so I have finished out The Rising Storm. I gotta say, I was feeling very meh, very take it or leave it at the halfway point, but I'm impressed. Scott won me over by the end of the book, probably because there's a lot more action going on, but also the interactions we would see from the characters and the dynamics that were developing and how they were shifting were all so much better. The characters, there's just so many, and I wasn't really allowed to get invested in anybody. Many of them end up being inconsequential or almost just static. They don't impact the plot in any real way, but thankfully I do think that issue is finally starting to get resolved towards the end of this book, especially when it comes to some of the Jedi characters. I have been invested in Bell, the Padawan who we met in Light of the Jedi and also follow here, the entire way through. He is the one character that I actually really enjoyed seeing, understanding how he is growing as a Jedi, especially off the events that take place in Light of the Jedi, which we'll come back to that in a minute. But Elzar Mann is one who we met in the prior book as well, and I just felt nothing for him. It was more irritating too because he was starting to struggle with his relationship to the Force and his ability to stay true to his oath, namely when it comes to relationships. It just didn't feel like that had been developed for me to be convinced by it. However, we finally see some of that expanded upon when he kind of takes things a step too far. And he finally acknowledges this and realizes he needs to work on this. That's when I was really interested. When 𝗖ście ends up interacting with 𝗖cie, a woman who is sensitive to the Force, has a lightsaber, but is not a Jedi, and the dynamic that we see between them, so fun. I am all over that, and I really want to see more of it in the future books. We also have Stellan, who was friends with 𝗖ście as a child, and initially he very much felt like Kenobi-lite. I do think by the end of this, especially off of some emotional scenes we have with him involved, that was really good and finally endeared me to him, made me interested to see more of his story and where things are going to go in the next installments. Everybody else, apart from 𝗖ście, 𝗖cie, Stellan, and Bell, forgettable. With this specific phase focusing on the expansion of the Republic and trying to get connected to different planets in the Outer Rim, there's a lot of growth around the universe in this, and I did like that. You get to learn about many different species, there's a lot of different animals from some of these planets, food from the culture, all that stuff's really cool, and I am always impressed at how expansive the Star Wars universe is. Between that and then the really fast-paced action sequences, pacing felt so freaking jumpy. Then finally, the Nihil. They are the villains of this section. They very much are space pirates, but it's clear to us that the leader, Marchion Ro, has plans for something more. And because I read the prior phase, I know it's probably going to connect to plans that like the Path of the Open Hand had, but not quite in the same way. Unfortunately though, I feel like it's been underutilized so far, though I am still very intrigued to see what is he wanting to do? How is he going to go about it? I think the space pirates just don't really work for me as well as the cult did. So by the end of this, I did really enjoy it. There was one element to the finale that I didn't love. I wish Scott would have changed that slightly, but it's not something super huge that will impact my rating. I went back and forth between giving this like a 3.5 star and a 4 star because it did drag, but I really was all over the ending. I blasted through the last like 30% of this. So I think a good representation is a 4 star, but in reality, my rating's more like a 3.75 for my graphic and also Goodreads. It's just gonna say 4 stars. And on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a sci-fi emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!